What he secretly thinks when you stop texting him isn't what most women imagine, and the truth might shake everything you believed about masculine psychology and the hidden power dynamics that govern modern relationships. The moment your messages cease to illuminate his phone screen, something profound shifts in the architecture of his mind. Something that connects directly to the deepest layers of the masculine psyche that Carl Jung spent decades mapping through his exploration of the collective unconscious. When silence replaces your constant availability, his brain doesn't immediately register relief or freedom as you might expect. Instead, it triggers what psychologists call the scarcity principle, but on a much deeper, more primal level than simple economics or dating games. His unconscious mind, that vast repository of ancestral memories and evolutionary programming, begins to recalibrate your value in ways that operate far below his conscious awareness. The masculine psyche, shaped by millions of years of hunting, pursuing, and conquering, suddenly encounters something it cannot control or predict. And this creates a cognitive dissonance that reverberates through every layer of his psychological structure. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations about the nature of attachment and how humans suffer most when they cannot control outcomes, and this ancient wisdom applies perfectly to the modern man's experience when faced with feminine withdrawal. His ego, that carefully constructed persona he presents to the world, begins to fracture slightly because it cannot comprehend why something that was freely given has suddenly become unavailable. The masculine ego thrives on certainty, on clear cause and effect relationships, and your silence disrupts this fundamental need for logical progression and predictable outcomes. But here's where Jung's understanding of the shadow becomes crucial to understanding his internal experience. Every man carries within him a shadow self that harbors his deepest insecurities, his fears of abandonment, and his terror of being deemed unworthy. When you stop texting, you inadvertently activate this shadow material, bringing to the surface all the times he felt invisible, ignored, or dismissed by the feminine throughout his life. This isn't necessarily about you specifically, but about every woman who ever made him feel inadequate, every mother figure who withheld approval, every early romantic disappointment that taught him love could vanish without warning or explanation. The silence you create becomes a mirror that reflects back his own relationship with scarcity and abundance, with worthiness and rejection. His conscious mind might rationalize your absence with thoughts like, "She's busy" or "She's playing games," but his unconscious is conducting a much more complex analysis. It's measuring his own value against the sudden shift in your attention, questioning whether he said something wrong, did something to displease you, or whether you've simply found someone more interesting, more worthy of your mental energy and emotional investment. What most women don't understand is that masculine psychology is fundamentally different from feminine psychology when it comes to communication and connection. While women often withdraw to process emotions or create space for clarity, men typically interpret withdrawal as a form of punishment or rejection. This isn't a character flaw or emotional immaturity. It's a fundamental difference in how the masculine and feminine psyches process relationship dynamics and emotional availability. His nervous system, designed for action and resolution, begins to experience what trauma specialists call dysregulation when faced with the ambiguity of your silence. The not knowing creates a state of hypervigilance where his mind cycles through possible scenarios, each one colored by his own psychological wounds and unconscious beliefs about his lovability. He might find himself checking his phone obsessively, not out of neediness, but because his brain is seeking closure and resolution to restore equilibrium to his internal emotional landscape. The truly fascinating aspect of this dynamic is how it connects to Jung's concept of the anima, the feminine aspect that exists within every man's unconscious. Your silence forces him to confront his own relationship with the feminine, both internally and externally. If his anima is underdeveloped or wounded, your withdrawal will feel like a rejection of his very essence. If he has done the inner work to integrate his feminine side, he might actually appreciate the space and use it for his own reflection and growth. Seneca taught that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and this wisdom perfectly captures what happens in his mind during those hours and days of silence. His imagination fills the void with stories, most of them negative, most of them centered around his own inadequacy or your potential betrayal. He doesn't just miss your messages, he misses the validation they provided. the confirmation that he exists in your mental landscape, that he matters enough to warrant your thoughts and attention. The withdrawal of your consistent communication creates what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, which is actually the most powerful form of conditioning known to behavioral science. Your previous pattern of regular texting established a reward system in his brain, releasing small doses of dopamine with each exchange. When this reward system is suddenly disrupted, his brain doesn't shut down the expectation, it intensifies it, creating a psychological state similar to what gamblers experience when they can't stop pulling the slot machine lever. This isn't about manipulation or control, it's about understanding the fundamental architecture of human attachment and how the masculine psyche processes connection and disconnection. When you stop texting, you're not just removing words from his day, you're removing a source of emotional regulation, a touchstone that helped him feel grounded and connected to something outside himself. The absence of your digital presence creates a vacuum that his mind feels compelled to fill, often with anxiety, doubt, and increasingly intense thoughts about your relationship and his place within it. The deeper psychological mechanisms at play when you withdraw your textual presence reveal the intricate dance between masculine projection and feminine power, a dynamic that Jung explored extensively in his work on the animus and anima. His mind begins to project onto your silence all of his own unresolved relationship with the feminine archetype, creating elaborate narratives that say more about his internal landscape than about your actual intentions or feelings. This projection process is unconscious and automatic, rooted in decades of conditioning about how relationships should function and what feminine withdrawal typically signifies in his personal mythology. What emerges from this silence is often a profound confrontation with his own attachment style, developed in the earliest years of his life through interactions with primary caregivers. If he experienced inconsistent availability from maternal figures, your sudden communication gap will trigger what attachment theorists call an anxious activation, flooding his system with the same biochemical cocktails he experienced as a child when love felt uncertain or conditional. His adult rational mind knows you're probably just living your life, but his emotional brain is operating from much older programming that equates silence with abandonment. The masculine ego's relationship with pursuit and conquest becomes painfully evident during these periods of digital silence. Throughout history, men have been conditioned to chase, to pursue, to overcome obstacles in order to claim their prize, whether that prize was territory, resources, or romantic partnership. Your silence transforms you from something easily accessible into something that must be won back. And this shift activates deep evolutionary programming that can make you seem more valuable and desirable than when your attention was freely given. This isn't conscious manipulation on your part, but your withdrawal inadvertently taps into primal reward systems that equate scarcity with worth. Epictetus taught that we cannot control external events, only our responses to them. Yet most men struggle immensely with this wisdom when faced with feminine silence. His mind becomes a battlefield between his desire to reach out and his pride's insistence that he maintain composure and dignity. This internal conflict creates tremendous psychological tension because it forces him to confront his own neediness while simultaneously battling his fear of appearing weak or desperate. The longer your silence continues, the more this tension builds, often leading to impulsive decisions that he later regrets. The shadow work aspect of this experience cannot be understated. As your absence forces him to confront parts of himself, he typically keeps hidden from conscious awareness. His shadow contains all the rejected aspects of his personality, including his vulnerability, his fear of abandonment, his deep hunger for feminine approval, and his terror of being deemed insufficient or unworthy of love. When you stop texting, these shadow elements begin to surface, creating internal chaos as he struggles to maintain his conscious persona while processing unconscious material that your withdrawal has activated. What makes this dynamic particularly complex is how it intersects with modern dating culture and the abundance mentality that social media and dating apps have created. His rational mind might tell him that there are countless other women available at the swipe of a finger, but his emotional brain is focused solely on the one woman who has chosen to withdraw her attention. This creates a fascinating paradox where abundance and scarcity coexist in his psyche, leaving him feeling simultaneously empowered by his options and devastated by your specific absence. The trauma response that can emerge from prolonged silence reveals how deeply communication has become woven into our sense of safety and connection in relationships. His nervous system, already primed for threat detection in the uncertain landscape of modern romance, may interpret your silence as a form of emotional threat, triggering fight-or-flight responses that make it difficult for him to think clearly or act from a place of centered masculinity. This isn't weakness, it's biology. It's millions of years of evolution that have taught humans to interpret social rejection as a threat to survival itself. Jung's concept of individuation becomes relevant here because your silence forces him to confront his own completeness as a separate being. If he has not done the inner work of becoming whole within himself, your withdrawal will feel like losing a part of his identity, rather than simply losing access to another person's attention. Men who have achieved greater individuation will experience your silence differently, perhaps even appreciating it as an opportunity for introspection and personal growth, rather than interpreting it as rejection or punishment. His relationship with time itself shifts during these periods of silence, with minutes feeling like hours and hours feeling like days. The anticipation of your possible response creates a state of suspended animation, where he finds it difficult to fully engage with other activities or relationships. This temporal distortion reveals how much mental energy he was unconsciously dedicating to your communication pattern, and how disruptive it is when that pattern suddenly changes without warning or explanation. The stories his mind creates during your absence often reveal his deepest beliefs about relationships, about feminine nature, and about his own worthiness of love and attention. These internal narratives become a form of psychological archaeology, excavating beliefs and fears that may have been buried for years, but remain powerfully influential in shaping his emotional responses. Your silence becomes a catalyst for this excavation process, bringing to light material that he might otherwise never examine or address. Before we continue exploring the deeper layers of this psychological dance, I want to pause here and speak directly to your heart. If this resonates with something you've experienced, if you recognize yourself or someone you care about in these words, please know that you're not alone in this complex journey of understanding love and connection. This channel exists to illuminate these hidden dynamics, not to manipulate or control, but to bring awareness and empowerment to your relationships. If these insights are stirring something within you, I gently invite you to subscribe and join our community of women who are choosing consciousness over confusion, wisdom over games. Share in the comments what you've discovered about yourself through these dynamics, because your story might be exactly what another woman needs to hear to feel less alone in her own journey of understanding love. The neurochemical cascade that occurs in his brain during your textual absence reveals the profound biological underpinnings of modern attachment, and how digital communication has rewired our most basic relationship patterns. When your regular messaging pattern established itself in his daily rhythm, his brain began producing anticipatory dopamine, creating a reward loop that made checking his phone and finding your messages a source of genuine pleasure and emotional regulation. The sudden interruption of this pattern doesn't simply remove the pleasure, it creates a state of dopamine dysregulation that can manifest as restlessness, anxiety, and an almost compulsive need to restore the interrupted communication flow. This biochemical response connects to what trauma specialists understand about how our nervous systems process perceived threats to attachment bonds. His amygdala, that ancient alarm system designed to protect him from danger, may interpret your prolonged silence as a form of social threat, flooding his system with stress hormones that make rational thinking more difficult and emotional reactions more intense. This isn't emotional immaturity, it's neurobiology. It's how human brains are designed to respond when important social connections seem threatened or uncertain. The masculine psyche's relationship with control becomes painfully evident during these periods of enforced uncertainty. From childhood, most men are taught that their value lies in their ability to solve problems, fix situations, and create order from chaos. Your silence presents him with a problem he cannot solve through traditional masculine approaches, a situation he cannot fix through action or logic, And this powerlessness can trigger what psychologists call learned helplessness, a state where his usual coping mechanisms feel inadequate to address the emotional challenge he's facing. Jung's understanding of the collective unconscious suggests that his response to your withdrawal taps into archetypal patterns that extend far beyond his individual psychology. The archetype of the withdrawing feminine, the mysterious woman who appears and disappears like the moon, connects to mythological and religious traditions spanning thousands of years. His psyche recognizes this pattern on a collective level, which is why your silence can feel so significant and emotionally charged, even if your conscious intention was simply to create some personal space. What emerges during these silent periods is often a profound examination of his own relationship with worthiness and self-value. If his sense of self-worth is heavily dependent on external validation, particularly feminine validation, your absence forces him to confront the fragility of his own self-concept. Men who have built their identity around being needed, wanted, or desired by women will experience your silence as a fundamental challenge to their core sense of self, creating existential anxiety that goes far beyond simple romantic disappointment. The projection mechanisms that activate during your absence reveal the shadow material he carries about feminine nature and relationship dynamics. If he has unresolved anger toward women, your silence may trigger disproportionate resentment or suspicion about your motives. If he carries deep wounds around feminine betrayal or abandonment, your withdrawal may activate trauma responses that have little to do with your actual relationship and everything to do with his unhealed psychological history with the feminine archetype. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about the discipline of desire and how suffering emerges from our attachment to outcomes we cannot control. Your silence becomes a masterclass in this ancient wisdom, forcing him to confront his own attachment to your availability and attention. This confrontation can be profoundly growth-inducing if he's psychologically prepared for it, or deeply destabilizing if he lacks the inner resources to process the experience consciously. The way he manages his impulses during your silence reveals crucial information about his emotional maturity and capacity for intimate relationship. Men with greater self-awareness and emotional regulation will use the space for introspection and personal activities, perhaps even appreciating the break from constant communication. Those with less developed emotional skills may spiral into obsessive behaviors, excessive analysis of your previous interactions, or desperate attempts to re-establish contact that often backfire by appearing needy or invasive. His social conditioning around masculine expression creates additional layers of complexity during these periods of uncertainty. Society teaches men to hide their emotional needs, to appear strong and unaffected by relationship challenges, yet your silence may be triggering profound feelings of vulnerability and longing that directly contradict these conditioned responses. This internal conflict between authentic feeling and social expectations can create tremendous psychological pressure that he may not know how to process or express healthily. The timing of your silence within the broader context of your relationship trajectory significantly influences his psychological response. If this withdrawal occurs during the early stages of connection when patterns are still forming, it will impact him differently than if it happens after months or years of established communication. Early withdrawal can feel like rejection or disinterest, while later withdrawal may trigger fears of relationship deterioration or concerns about emotional distance growing between you. What many women don't understand is how differently masculine psychology processes ambiguity compared to feminine psychology. While women often appreciate nuance and complexity in emotional situations, men typically prefer clarity and direct communication. Your silence forces him to operate in a realm of uncertainty that may feel deeply uncomfortable and anxiety-provoking, not because he lacks emotional depth, but because his psychological architecture is organized differently around communication and connection. The stories he creates during your absence often reveal his core beliefs about relationships and his role within them. If he believes that consistent communication is necessary for relationship health, your silence may trigger fears about the foundation of your connection. If he believes that space and independence are important in relationships, he may respond more positively to your withdrawal, perhaps even respecting the boundaries you're creating through your silence. His relationship with technology and digital communication adds another layer to this complex dynamic. For many men, Text messaging has become the primary vehicle for emotional connection and intimacy, replacing face-to-face conversation and physical presence as the main channel for relationship maintenance. When this channel suddenly goes quiet, it can feel like losing the primary bridge between his inner world and yours, creating a sense of disconnection that feels disproportionately significant compared to the actual absence of a few text messages. The individuation process that your silence can trigger in his psyche represents one of the most profound opportunities for psychological growth that modern relationships can provide, though few men recognize it as such in the moment. Jung described individuation as the central process of human development, the journey toward becoming who we truly are beneath all the masks and personas we wear for the world. Your withdrawal forces him to confront fundamental questions about his identity outside of relationship, his capacity for inner fulfillment, and his relationship with solitude that he might otherwise avoid for years or even decades. When the external validation source that your messages provided is suddenly removed, he's forced to confront the internal landscape he may have been avoiding through constant connectivity and digital distraction. This confrontation can be profoundly uncomfortable because it requires him to sit with feelings and thoughts he typically medicates through social interaction, work obligations, entertainment consumption, or other forms of external stimulation. Your silence creates a forced meditation on his own completeness, his own capacity to generate internal peace and satisfaction without relying on feminine attention for emotional regulation. The shadow integration work that becomes available during these periods of enforced introspection can be transformational if he's psychologically prepared to engage with it consciously. His shadow contains not only his fears and insecurities, but also his disowned strengths, his unexpressed creativity, his capacity for independence and self-direction that may have atrophied through over-reliance on relationship for identity and purpose. Your absence creates space for these shadow elements to emerge and potentially be integrated into his conscious personality structure. Seneca's teachings on emotional resilience become particularly relevant during these testing periods, as your silence provides an opportunity for him to develop what the Stoics called inner citadel, an unshakable core of self-worth that doesn't depend on external circumstances or other people's behavior for its stability. If he can learn to find peace and contentment during your absence, he develops psychological muscles that will serve him throughout his entire relational life, making him a more stable and attractive partner when connection does occur. The way your silence impacts his creativity and productivity often reveals how much mental energy he was unconsciously dedicating to your communication pattern. Some men find that your absence initially decreases their focus and effectiveness, as their minds cycle through anxiety about the relationship. Others discover that removing the constant stimulation of digital communication actually enhances their ability to concentrate on personal projects, creative endeavors, and professional responsibilities that had been suffering from divided attention. His relationship with other women in his life may shift during your absence as he seeks alternative sources of feminine connection and validation. This isn't necessarily about romantic replacement, but about understanding how your communication was fulfilling certain psychological needs that he now feels compelled to meet through other channels. Some men reach out to female friends, family members, or colleagues more during these periods, while others withdraw from feminine contact entirely as they process the confusion your silence has created. The masculine tendency toward problem-solving can become both a gift and a curse during these periods of relationship uncertainty. His natural inclination to analyze, strategize, and take action may lead him to overthink your silence, creating elaborate theories about your motivations and developing complex plans to win back your attention. This mental activity can prevent him from simply being present with the reality of the situation and learning from the experience of not having control over another person's behavior. Jung's concept of the transcendent function becomes relevant here, as your silence creates an opportunity for him to bridge the gap between his conscious desires for connection and his unconscious need for independence and self-reliance. This bridging process can lead to a more mature and integrated approach to relationship, where he's neither desperately dependent on feminine attention nor defensively avoidant of emotional connection, but capable of maintaining his center regardless of external relationship circumstances. The spiritual dimensions of this experience often go unrecognized, but your withdrawal can function as a form of involuntary spiritual practice, forcing him into a kind of meditation on impermanence, attachment, and the nature of love itself. Buddhist teachings about the suffering caused by grasping and attachment become viscerally real as he experiences the pain of wanting something he cannot control or obtain. This suffering, if approached consciously, can become a gateway to greater wisdom about the nature of desire and fulfillment. His dreams during periods of your silence often become particularly vivid and revealing, as his unconscious processes the relationship dynamics and emotional material that your withdrawal has activated. These dreams may feature scenarios of reunion, abandonment, pursuit, or transformation that provide valuable insights into his deeper psychological relationship with love, loss, and masculine identity. Paying attention to these nocturnal messages can provide him with guidance about his inner work and relationship patterns that might otherwise remain hidden. The way he handles practical life activities during your absence reveals how much your communication was serving as a form of emotional co-regulation.
Some men find that basic self-care activities like eating well, exercising regularly, and maintaining their living environment become more difficult when their primary source of emotional connection is unavailable. Others discover that they're more capable of self-care and personal responsibility when they're not using relationship as a distraction from personal development.
Your silence may also activate what therapists call earned secure attachment, where his nervous system learns to self-soothe and regulate without needing constant reassurance from others. This is particularly valuable for men who developed anxious attachment patterns in childhood, as your withdrawal provides an opportunity to practice tolerating uncertainty and maintaining emotional equilibrium without external support. This skill, once developed, enhances all of his relationships and contributes to his overall psychological resilience. The integration of this experience into his overall relationship philosophy and approach depends largely on his willingness to process it consciously rather than simply reacting emotionally. Men who use your silence as an opportunity for self-reflection, inner work, and personal growth often emerge from the experience with greater clarity about their relationship needs, better boundaries, and improved capacity for healthy independence within intimate partnership. Those who only react from wounded ego or anxious attachment may learn to fear feminine withdrawal rather than understanding its potential gifts. As we reach the end of this exploration into the hidden territories of masculine psychology, I want to speak to your heart once more. The insights we've uncovered together aren't meant to be weapons for manipulation or tools for control, but bridges toward deeper understanding and more authentic connection. If this journey through the masculine psyche has revealed something meaningful about your own relationships, about patterns you've lived or witnessed, I invite you to carry this awareness forward with compassion for both yourself and the men in your life. Please subscribe to join our growing community of conscious women who are choosing wisdom over games, authenticity over strategy. Share your own discoveries in the comments below. Tell us about the moments when silence revealed truth, when withdrawal created clarity, when stepping back allowed love to step forward. Your story matters, your insights are valuable, and together we're creating a new paradigm of conscious relationship that honors both masculine and feminine psychology in all their beautiful complexity.